Hello, my true crime friends. I'm back again for another video. As the days go by and more people in Montello, Nevada and Ogden, Utah turn up on YouTube, we're learning more about the circumstances of 19-year-old farmer Dylan Round's disappearance. Montello local and the proprietor of the Saddle Sore Bar, Kurt Wadsworth, has a daughter who is going by Sammy. Sammy is very articulate, and she was on Zav Girls Live yesterday, and she clarified some important details in the case. Not sure how old Sammy is, but she's married and she said she has a 19-year-old son. Let's remember that whatever Sammy says may or may not be true. Kurt Wadsworth is her father, and so naturally she wants to defend him. Sammy said she was speaking for Kurt because he has trouble keeping things straight and she doesn't want his words getting twisted. I'm going to try to present the information in a clear, organized manner so that we can all get it and keep it straight. I'm going to start with the timeline. The first noteworthy incident occurred on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2022. That's when Chase Venstra allegedly was spotted on a ranch in the desert wearing camouflage and carrying a gun on his back. The people at the ranch got a hold of Chase and held him while they called the police in Elko, Nevada. However, according to Sammy, the Elko police did not come out and Chase was allowed to leave despite him having an outstanding warrant. At that point, Venstra took off running into the desert. The next day, on Wednesday, May 24th, Dylan, while driving his truck in Lucin, encountered Chase Venstra. At that point, Chase was bloody, wearing one shoe, and had his shirt tied around his waist. He no longer had the gun with him, from what I understand. Dylan picked Venstra up, gave him a warm Coke, and allowed him to use his cell phone. According to Sammy, Dylan had his .40 caliber pistol in the truck with him at that time. Also, according to Sammy, Chase Venstra is a known thief and he's very brazen about his behavior. She said Venstra has an extensive criminal history, which we know, and that he choked his ex-girlfriend, allegedly. Sammy believes that Venstra is definitely capable of hurting Dylan. She said that he shot all of his dogs about a week or two before Dylan went missing. Note that Chase also has charges of animal abuse on his record. Sammy has said that Chase would take his kids with him when he committed thefts. The picture that is emerging of Chase Venstra is one of a guy who was having a major meltdown prior to Dylan's disappearance, running with guns through the desert, shooting his dogs. It's sounding like he was unhinged. Dylan spent Wednesday night in town, according to Sammy, and slept at her father Kurt's mobile home. Apparently, Kurt Wadsworth has two mobile homes. Sammy explained that when Dylan had to work on another farm that was beyond Montello, he would stay at the mobile home there where he could get a hot shower, get a hot meal, use the Wi-Fi. Dylan's trailer in Lucin doesn't have running water or Wi-Fi. He also had to rely on a generator to power his refrigerator. Often Dylan stored food in a cooler because the refrigerator wasn't running if the generator wasn't running. Dylan also spent Thursday night in town. Sammy also saw and spoke to Dylan on Friday in Montello. Both she and her father Kurt spoke to Dylan, and he told them that he power washed his truck for 2 hours. And this would make sense if we consider what Dylan's mother said about there being no tracks or footprints around the truck when she arrived at Dylan's farm on Monday, May 30th, meaning no perpetrator was out there power washing Dylan's truck after whatever crime went down. Sammy also said that the damage to the front of Dylan's truck was there before Dylan vanished. He apparently slid on ice in a parking lot and hit a pillar, and that's how the damage occurred. Sammy described Dylan as being very driven and said she thought he had something to prove to his grandfather, Larry. Sammy also believes that Dylan likely worked throughout the night on Friday and into the morning on Saturday in order to get all his seed planted. On Saturday morning, Dylan's grandmother, Karen Rounds, called him at 6:51 a.m. and Dylan told her he couldn't talk because it was raining and he had to get his seed truck to the grain shed over at the property where Jim Brenner was living in a trailer. That was the last time Dylan spoke to any of his family members, and that's the last time anyone can say that Dylan was okay. His phone pinged out in Lucin later that Saturday at 3:41 p.m. Per Sammy, Dylan's grandmother called Don Hatley. Yes, it turns out his name is Don Hatley. Later in the day on Saturday to check on Dylan. Don Hatley went to check on Dylan twice, according to Sammy. Once on Saturday alone, and again on Sunday when he was accompanied by Jim Brenner. Seeing all of Dylan's vehicles there, Don reported back to Karen that everything seemed okay. Per Sammy, there was no third person, Don and Jim. Sammy also stated that Don Hatley is a very tall man and is over 6 feet tall. We know height might be important in this case if the seat in Dylan's truck being moved all the way forward was done by someone other than Dylan. Sammy said that Kurt and Don Hatley are friends, but it's looking more and more like the truck, Dylan's truck, may not be involved in the crime. Sammy stated that Dylan's father, Justin, found Dylan's key fob in a pocket of Dylan's pants. Justin also found Dylan's pistol in the trailer, so the key fob and the pistol were not missing. It would appear that Dylan's mother, Candace Cooley, got those details wrong, or maybe she didn't know that the items were found when she spoke out to the media. Dylan's rifle or gun was also determined to be back in his bedroom in Idaho, so that also isn't missing, if we are to believe Sammy. Note that Sammy said that Robert Aviles drove Chase Venstra out to Lucin in his mother's black Subaru on Saturday and dropped him off by the trees near Dylan's pond. Aviles, like Chase Venstra and Jim Brenner, has a criminal background. Aviles apparently stabbed a security guard during a robbery. Sammy also stated that Robert Aviles once pulled a black-colored gun on Jim Brenner. Talk about the Wild West. So Aviles sounds like a dangerous person as well. Aviles has said that after he dropped off Chase on Dylan's farm, Chase drove off on a three-wheeler. So Chase Venstra was definitely out in Lucin on the day Dylan disappeared, if Sammy is right. Sammy is certain that Venstra must have known that Dylan received a check for $33,000 the week before. So it's possible that Venstra, knowing that Dylan received all this money, may have headed out to Lucin with the intention of robbing Dylan. Could Chase have been angry that Dylan didn't have any cash on him and done something to hurt him? It's a possibility. Sammy also stated that a friend of hers who works in the local gas station saw Robert Aviles at the gas station on Saturday and that he was acting very strangely. This person then received a call from Aviles about 5 days later, and he was asking her which day he was there. That's very odd. Aviles also admitted to this woman that Chase was hiding in his Subaru at that time. The lady then wondered if Dylan could also have been in the car at the time. Per Sammy, Aviles' Subaru has not been processed forensically. That's very upsetting to hear. Sammy gave this lady the FBI's number, so I'm hoping the FBI has now taken that vehicle in for processing. As for the photo that's been shared of the interior of Dylan's trailer, It's been said by the PI, Jim Terry, that Dylan's family did some light cleaning in the trailer before the photo was taken because Karen Rounds needed to use the bathroom. We have to remember that when Dylan's family arrived in Lucin on May 30th, they didn't realize that Dylan might be missing due to foul play. So they went inside his camper and dug around. They also broke into his red Ford truck before they found the key fob. In doing all of this, they would have contaminated the crime scene if indeed a crime went down at the farm, in the trailer, at the truck, in the truck. Sadly, this type of thing seems to happen often in missing persons cases because family members don't automatically jump to the conclusion that someone has harmed their loved one. It also happened in the Delphi case when hundreds of searchers descended on the hiking trails near the Monon High Bridge. No one realized at that time that they were trampling on a crime scene. So, let's talk about Jim Brenner. Sammy said that Brenner was given a job by the man leasing that parcel of land adjacent to Dylan's farm. I believe that would be Ed Hirschberger, and that's why Brenner was living out there in Lucin. So Brenner was not squatting on the land, he actually had a job there. She also said that Brenner did not like it that Dylan had permission to use the grain shed there. Brenner put up the fence with a lock to make it more difficult for Dylan to access the shed. Dylan, frustrated by Brenner's efforts, would sometimes take the fence down, inciting the wrath of Jim Brenner. According to Sammy, Dylan had told Brenner that if he didn't stop locking the gates, he was going to call the landowner and get Brenner taken off the land. Were these things enough for Brenner to get rid of Dylan? Maybe. Sammy describes Jim Brenner as follows. She guesses that he's about 5'6" tall. She said he's a bit of a hothead, and this is because Brenner got into 2 fights in Montello, one of which was with an elderly man. Sammy said in both fights Brenner lost. She said Brenner got his butt handed to him in both fights. Sammy also says that she doesn't feel like Brenner is all there, as if he's not really all that swift. She stated that Brenner has a vehicle, but it has a problem with overheating, so that if he drives more than 20 minutes, the vehicle overheats. Last year, when Brenner didn't have a car, he would ride his horse the 5 miles to Montello. And Sammy made a good point about Dylan's boots being found near Brenner's trailer. She thinks that maybe the true perpetrator or perpetrators put the boots there to try and implicate Brenner. And it's true, if Brenner hurt Dylan, why would he leave his boots near the grain shed and his trailer? Sammy also stated that no one in town, including her father, knew of Brenner's extensive criminal history. They were aware that he was a felon, but they didn't know exactly what crimes he had committed. According to Sammy, Kurt allowed Brenner to live with him for a period of time. Apparently, Brenner's trailer out in the desert was robbed and then blown up. It was after this that Kurt invited the homeless Brenner to live with him. But after Brenner got into the fights in Montello, Kurt apparently kicked him out, and that's when Hirschberger offered Brenner a job out on the land adjacent to Dylan's farm. I'm not sure what exactly Brenner was doing for that job, perhaps keeping an eye on the property and some farm labor. Per Sammy, everyone out there has to rely on neighbors to watch their property when they're out of town because thieves always turn up. Let me just say that I never want to visit Montello or Lucin after hearing about all of this stuff. The sun tunnels will just have to come off my bucket list. When asked about her Uncle Troy's scratches, the ones on his arm, Sammy said Troy was drunk and he was riding his 3-wheeler when it flipped over and he had scratches on his arm from the gravel. She said such scratches look very different from nail scratches. It was more of a road rash. Troy only knew Dylan from Dylan coming into his restaurant and getting a hot meal. Troy has never been out to Dylan's farm. Sammy said the following about her father, Kurt Wadsworth. Kurt never made $200,000 in a year, as he boasted to this person named Salty Pancakes. Kurt told Salty that he only worked 2 hours a day on the computer, and it was about bringing product in. Many took this to mean that the product was drugs. Sammy denied all of this and said her father is struggling financially right now because he hasn't been working due to the stress of worrying about Dylan, due to going out on searches on his motorcycle for Dylan, and because tourists are no longer coming to Montello, perhaps because of the cave. Also, Kurt's backhoe is still in Lucin. He took it there when he helped Dylan's family drain the pond. Kurt also has another job to do out there, and so he's leaving the backhoe in Lucin for the time being until he's able to do that job. So per Sammy, the backhoe is not in Lucin because it's being held as part of a crime scene. Sammy also described her father as not being very tech savvy. When asked about her father's relationship with Dylan, Sammy said Kurt met him about 3 years ago when they were both working in Lucin on another person's farm. Per Sammy, her dad was simply a mentor and a father figure to Dylan. There was no romantic relationship, and she says Dylan isn't gay and her father doesn't dress in drag. Sammy said those rumors were put out there by people who dislike Kurt, including her cousin Alicia, her brother Aaron, and Ellen and Dylan Berg. Ellen Berg owns the buildings where the Saddle Sore and the Cowboy Bar and Grill are located. Per Sammy, the slot machines in the Saddle Sore and Cowboy Bar and Grill are owned by Nevada's gambling district. Sammy described her brother Aaron as being a very troubled person who's currently in jail because of charges for trafficking meth and fentanyl. She also said that Aaron does not get along with Kurt. Sammy paints a picture of Kurt as being someone who's been seeking help from many psychics since Dylan's disappearance. She confirmed that the story Kurt told Dylan's mother, Candace, about Dylan being abducted and held hostage in Robert Avilas's house came from her mother, who apparently dabbles in tarot cards. Sammy also stated, as did Kurt, that the Wadsworths had a big family gathering on Memorial Day weekend. She said her father was with his family the entire weekend, so he could not have possibly gone out to Lucin and committed any crime. And if that's true, and Kurt's relatives were there with him throughout the weekend and will swear to that, that makes for a fairly solid alibi, provided all the hours are accounted for. Sammy also said that her father has only been in trouble once with the law, and it was back in the 80s, and it had something to do with his taxes, and the charges were eventually dropped. Kurt handed over his phone to the authorities, according to Sammy, who later returned it to him. She said they didn't find anything on the phone. And she said that on June 4th, 4 detectives and the FBI interviewed Kurt. Sammy also talked about this Ty Corbin person who's been showing up on Doug's lives on his channel, No Thanks Investigates. According to Sammy, Ty is actually named Todd, and he doesn't live in Montello. He doesn't know the land out there, and he never met Dylan Rounds. She said that Ty lives with someone named Phyllis who has cancer. Apparently, Ty and Phyllis used to run an alpaca farm, but when they were unable to afford food for the animals, they set the alpacas loose in the desert. Sammy also said that Ty often hangs out with her aunt, and that is how he's getting his information about Dylan. Ty is also said to be friends with Robert Avilas, which is a rather scary prospect since we know that Robert Avilas is a rather shady character. Sammy's take on Ty is that he's trying to get his hands on the $100,000 reward monies. She also doesn't think he's doing useful searches in the desert because he really has no clue about the land and he doesn't have access to a vehicle that would allow him to head into the mountains. She also said that her father and Ty once got into a fist fight, but she didn't explain what the fight was about. And just as in Beach Creek, where Summer Wells went missing, apparently this remote area suffers from a meth problem. Sammy said that in the last 4 years, meth has become an issue there. She also said that the Box Elder police don't do anything. They are slow to respond to calls. She said someone pulled a gun on her over the Memorial Day weekend in Montello, and when she reported it, the police showed zero interest in investigating the incident. There was also a discussion about a white SUV that was found abandoned in Park Valley, Utah. No one seems to know at this point if that vehicle is related to Dylan's disappearance. Sammy also said that she believes that Dylan was targeted, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider the remote location of Dylan's farm. Doesn't seem like people would have just stumbled on him. The question now is, why was Dylan Rounds targeted? Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now do me a favor, smash that like button for God's sakes, leave me a comment, subscribe if you're not yet subscribed, and if you want to support my channel, hey, you can do so right down there in the comments.